Hi, welcome back to the next part of my dementia videos. It's been quite a while since I did my last video. It's now 2 years later. The reason being, unfortunately, we did lose Mum in 2021, and the last video I did was the beginning of 21. So yeah, I've just taken a little while to ease myself back into it. But all is good, and I want to return to the videos to share our experiences moving forward, and I'm going to pick up where we left off. So the last thing I did in the last episode was to talk about getting a diagnosis. So this episode is all about how to, the living with dementia, living with the early stages once we've got the diagnosis, and how we coped with that. We basically got the diagnosis and decided, look, we've just got to get on with life now. We've got to find a way of living with this, find the best ways of dealing with it, and making the most of the time we've got with Mum and keeping her happy. So as I mentioned before, we didn't really get support from adult services, social services, the NHS. You are pretty much at that point in 2020, 2021, 22. Unfortunately, the help just isn't there. I really hope it will be in the future. But it wasn't there at that point. So we were left to really just fend for ourselves and get on with it. So I did a lot of research, looking at support groups, even found some Facebook groups that were very helpful. People were supportive, people who had already been through similar things. So I became quite active on that, as did my sister. We also found a local dementia group called Dementia Forward. It's a charity, and we did get some help and support from them. We continued to make sure Mum was having her normal routine. She was very, very routine based, and this became more and more crucial as the illness developed. So we did everything we could to make sure her routine wasn't disturbed. She would go for her hair appointments, and I would have a direct dialogue with the hairdresser myself, and I would pay the hairdresser directly so that Mum didn't have to worry about the money. Because invariably she was starting to go to the hairdressers, and then she wouldn't have any money in her purse. So we did things like that to try and support it without Mum realising really that there was anything wrong. So yeah, the routine carried on, and everything just sort of moved along quite nicely for a while. After a few months of things being settled, we decided that we wanted to try and introduce a few things that might well help Mum and help us deal with things. So we tried to encourage Mum to go to one of the dementia groups that Dementia Forward were running. They had a dementia cafe where you could go in and just sit and have a coffee. They also did a day where you go along and do activities and crafts and things like that, and Mum used to love doing things like that, so I thought she might like it, but no, it didn't work. Mum didn't want to do anything like that, and mainly because she still didn't think she had a problem. We also tried to introduce a cleaner to help her around the house, and also to give Mum a bit of company when we weren't there. After a few attempts, which were unsuccessful, we did actually manage to find a lovely lady who came and in the end didn't do any cleaning, but we pretended that she was a friend and she wanted to help. So she used to take Mum out for little trips out, and go and sit with her and have coffee. So that was nice for a while as well. I came across a new word when I was trying to understand why Mum couldn't accept her illness. It is very, very common with people with dementia that they don't want to accept that they've got this problem. You know, physically they might be absolutely fine, so they don't realise that there's a problem with their mind. I truly, truly hope that you don't have that problem, because I think if somebody can accept they've got a problem, you've then got lots more options available to you to try and give them help. Anyway, the new word that I learnt is anosognosia. Not sure whether you've heard of that one, but I hadn't. So as you can see on the screen, the definition is it's called a lack of insight, and it's a symptom of severe mental illness that impairs a person's ability to understand and perceive his or her illness. So their mind has gone to a state where they just can't see the problem. They can't. So moving on to finances. This was a fairly easy one to sort out, but it was quite a worrying one at one point. Mum had lost the ability to realise the value of money. So, you know, she would do things like give a £20 note to one of the grandchildren for pocket money, when really she probably meant to give a £5 note. And she might do that 2 times every day because she'd forgotten that she'd already given the £20 note. She would never pay for anything with coins because she couldn't count them. She didn't understand the value of each coin. So she would always pay for things with a note. And then when she got the change, she didn't have a clue whether the change was right or not. So we were starting to worry that, you know, maybe she was getting ripped off by some people, or losing money, or just walking away without the change. I don't know. There were all sorts of concerns at that point. She would also go to the bank. She could still at this point go to the cash machine and get money out. So she would, you know, press to get £100 out when really she only needed 50 or whatever. And we were noticing that she had lots of cash in her purse. And when we asked her why she needed that much cash, she didn't know. So it was very obvious that she couldn't deal with money anymore, really. So we decided at that point to use the lasting power of attorney for finances, and my sister and I took over Mum's bank account. We went and had a chat with the staff in the bank, who did say that, you know, she was going in quite regularly. She was struggling to use the cash machine. She was asking them questions a lot. So basically we took over the account so we could control them. But we left Mum with her bank card so she could still buy things or go to the cash machine if she wanted to. But we found that she wasn't doing that anymore, because I think she just didn't know what buttons to press. So she would only use cash. So we just made sure that there was cash in her purse all the time, but not too much. So basically she stopped using the cash machine and the bank altogether. She still had a building society account with the good old-fashioned passbook. So for those young people listening to this, you won't remember this at all, but building societies particularly, you used to have literally a paper book, and every time you wanted to get money out or put money in, you would take your book, give it to the person behind the counter. They would stamp it for you or put it through a machine, and it would record what you'd put in and what you'd taken out and what your balance was. So Mum was very happy to do this, because this is an old-fashioned way of doing it, and this is obviously what she still felt comfortable with. So again, we went and had a chat with the staff. The staff were brilliant. My sister and I both went in for a couple of different meetings with the manager and assistant manager. And again, we just made sure that there was money in her building society account, and she was able to go in whenever she wanted. But we soon started to get reports that she would go in and she was asking for £100, she was asking for £200, and so we came to an agreement with them where they would try and persuade mum just to get £20 at a time, or whatever. But we still had to allow this to happen because we wanted mum to feel independent for as long as she could. It's very common. It's very common with people with dementia, and mum definitely fell into this bracket. So she would have obsessions, and get fixated on a certain person, and she might have that same fixation for a couple of weeks, and she might go on to somebody else. So, for instance, she would get the bus into town, and she would absolutely fall in love with one of the bus drivers, and that bus driver was the best thing since sliced bread. I remember there was one female bus driver who was lovely to her. She was really good with mum, and literally that's all mum would talk about. She would just talk about Annette all the time, and Annette was gorgeous. And sometimes she would just sit on the bus and let it go round and round and round. She'd go around the bus route a couple of times and not get off the bus. So again, we made sure that the bus drivers realised that mum had Alzheimer's, so that they weren't worrying about her. She would also, unfortunately, get obsessed with one of her grandchildren. She had 5 grandchildren, and sometimes she'd become obsessed with one of them, and they would be the one that got all the pocket money. They would be the one that she talked about all the time. And again, this is she had lost the ability to realise that could possibly be hurtful to the other grandchildren. Now, they were all teenagers and upwards by this point, so they were well old enough to understand that she had a problem and understand the situation. But that was just an example of how she had lost that ability to see what was happening and what the consequences of that could be. I remember, that there were particular friends who she used to visit, and she might visit the same friend multiple times during that day, and it might be just because she'd forgotten that she had visited in the morning, and then she was visiting in the afternoon thinking she hadn't seen them for a few days. Again, I think this is very common from the research that I've done. She would put things in weird locations, and then she couldn't find them because she'd forgotten where she'd put them. But then she would start blaming other people, usually my sister and I. She would blame us for stealing her things or losing. She would say that we'd lost that item, which, again, you had to see the funny side. She would also do unusual things which were really out of character, because mum was always very, very organised, clean, tidy, organised. She would save all the insides of the toilet rolls, so the cardboard inserts, and she would have them all lined up and stacked up, and then she would stuff some toilet paper inside the toilet roll insert. So a really bizarre thing. And she would keep endless bottles and plastic bags, and and it was starting to get very messy in the house because she would keep all these things, so, and she didn't like it if we said anything about that or tried to tidy them up. So it was one of those things we just had to accept, really. Organisation, again, mum was extremely organised. She was a teacher all her career. She was so organised that she was the one out of all her friends who arranged reunions. She always, every single year without fail, arranged a school reunion for her and all her friends from the 6th form when she was at school. She always arranged that, and I know all her friends were really grateful for that because it brought them all together. Some of them were in different parts of the world, and that was great. But she started losing the ability to do all this organisation. So with the school reunion particularly, I started helping, and for a number of years I helped her to arrange that. At first I was helping her in the sort of way where she didn't realise I was helping, and then eventually for the last one I really pretty much arranged it all myself, but made sure she was involved. And, you know, she would forget birthdays, Christmas, all these sort of things that she was always absolutely spot on. She would always remember everybody's birthday and have the right card available, and have everything organised. She was a big word search, crosswords, Sudoku. She would do all that, but all that was lost gradually. But it was lost, and it was very sad. Anyway, on a lighter note, we used this period of time to make sure that we took Mum out lots. We went for days out. We took her on a couple of holidays. My sister and I took her over to Amsterdam, which is where she'd always wanted to go and see the tulips in Holland. And so we went on a lovely little trip to Amsterdam, saw the tulip fields, did some tours, and she absolutely loved it. So that was a great holiday, great memory. And I also took her on another occasion up to Pitlochry in Scotland, which is a place where she'd been many times before with my dad and with their friends Catherine and Ian. So again, that was a lovely holiday. It was a big eye-opener for me, that holiday was, because I really spent, you know, literally 24/7 with Mum, and at that point I did realise how bad things had got. But you know, we had some lovely times. We've got some lovely photos to remember, so that was well worth doing. Okay, so I think I've come to the end of this episode now. I hope I've been able to give you some hints and tips on what it's like at that stage, and maybe, you know, some things that might help you deal with it with your loved one as well. I think that the main thing I will say though is do what you can to enjoy life with your loved one at that point, you know, while they're still able to, you know, take them out for days, go do trips, make as many memories as you can, because I know my sister and I are very glad we did that at that stage. Okay, I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.